So, ladies and gentlemen, on Monday, the rupee logged its steepest single-day fall in nearly 2 years and ended the session 66 paise down at a historic low of 86.7 against the US dollar. The currency's previous record of a one-day fall of 68 paise was witnessed on February 6, 2 years ago. Today, the situation was marginally better, and the rupee closed the day up against the dollar by a whopping 8 paise. So there is no doubt then in everyone's minds that the fall of the rupee is a concern. And when coupled with the mayhem that we have been seeing in the markets for the past few days, it's nothing short of a crisis. Now we know that you are watching us because you are not someone who understands the intricacies of business and complicated terminology and jargon that come with business and markets and rupee and industry sex and so on. So we are here to declutter this and try and make you understand why is this a problem and how it impacts you. Firstly, what is causing the fall of the rupee in simple, clear terms? Let's break it down to you in 5 reasons. Number 1 is the high demand for dollars. When India imports more goods like oil, electronics, etc., more than it exports, there are more dollars required to pay for these imports. Now, this increases the demand for the dollars, pushing the value of the dollar up and the rupee down. Second is oil prices. We know that India imports a large chunk of its oil requirements. So if global oil prices rise, as they have been for the past 5 months, India has to spend more dollars to buy it. This increases the demand for dollars, again weakens the rupee. Then there is trade deficit. What is trade deficit? Very simple. When the value of what India is importing is exceeding the value of what India is exporting. A large trade deficit means India needs more dollars. Again, we have told you what happens. Then there is geopolitical tension. That's reason number 4. Global events like wars or political tension like we are seeing in Europe and the Middle East can make investors cautious. Then they'll prefer stable currencies which they see as safe havens, such as the US dollar. Again, strengthens the dollar, weakens the rupee. And finally, India's own economy. The economic growth is slowing, inflation is rising. Lower foreign investment in India can also reduce confidence in the rupee. Now you may ask, how does it impact me? Number 1, if you drive a vehicle, if you consume cooking oil in the kitchen, you are impacted because, as we said, India imports most of its oil, which means weaker rupee means increased oil prices. Your transportation, all other logistic costs increase. Then are imported goods. Anything imported like electronics, gadgets, even food items, even components of gadgets become expensive. So if you're planning to buy a smartphone or a car with imported components like even a silicon chip, you will feel the pinch. Travel becomes expensive. So if you're planning to go for an international trip this summer or even planning to go abroad to study, it will cost you a lot more because you'll have to spend a lot more rupees for the dollar equivalents. Then there's higher inflation with imported goods and raw materials becoming costlier, as we've told you. Also savings and investments. If you invest in mutual funds or stocks with significant foreign exposure, returns will be impacted. There's only one positive side. If you have relatives abroad, the money they send you will fetch you more rupees. So that's the only silver lining. So we have established now the concern behind it, and now let's look at the politics behind it. Let's look at the graphic that we are now going to put up on your screens. Under Manmohan Singh, in the UPA 2, the peak that the rupee ever reached against the dollar was 68.85 in August 2013. When the transition happened, when the current government or the Modi government took over in May 2014, the US dollar, the rupee was 58.52 against the US dollar. Today, the peak in the last 11 years under the Modi government has reached 86.70, and this is still counting. The worst probably is yet to come. Which is why the Congress now has been quick to target the government, especially the Prime Minister. The Congress President has termed it rank incompetence by the Prime Minister's government, a day after Jairam Ramesh pointed out that the Prime Minister is now trapped in the same hole he has been digging. The question then is the slide of the rupee correctable? And if so, is the government doing enough to ensure it? Let's put that question across to my guests who are joining me. Manish Barriarr, political analyst, Advocate Vijay Sadhana, who's a very senior economist, Anshul Avijit, who's spokesperson of the Congress Party, and Madhavan Narayanan, senior journalist and economist in his own right. Thank you so much. Good evening, gentlemen, for joining me. Let me start with you, Manish Barriarr. So, the Prime Minister in 2013, 2014, when he was giving speeches from the constructed ramparts of the Red Fort in Gujarat, was quick to link the fall of the rupee under the then Manmohan Singh government to the pride of the nation and said that the prestige of the nation was falling every time the rupee was falling against a dollar. By that same logic, today shouldn't those questions be asked to the government today as well, that isn't India's pride now fallen a bit further if the rupee is now 86.7 against the dollar?
Good evening to you, Ritangshu ji, and all your viewers, and to my co-panelist. So, I was listening very intently to your the opening remarks. So I picked up some words. For example, you said 8 paisa, it went up, and there was a remark gloriously or something. So it means that obviously you were not very happy that 8 paisa it went up. Second, I found a lot of errors, my perception. So there is nothing called absolute error, but I felt that the
No,
way
please
it
go
was
on. Yeah.
presented to your viewers, some of the points, for example, you said that foreign education would become costlier. If you see Canada, actually rupee has strengthened. If you see Euro, rupee has strengthened vis-a-vis that. So I don't think international travel is going to become, costlier because yes, if you want to go to US, yes, but otherwise a lot of other places, if you see vis-a-vis Indian currency, it has actually strengthened. Then you were also talking about oil prices being costlier. So I beg to differ because India has been able to manage oil prices very well, and it is not essential that our bill might go up, but it may not come to consumers directly. So I think these are the 2 points where I would,
No, what I mentioned
completely
was
agree.
international oil prices
Yes.
have increased, which is why the dollar has strengthened and correspondingly the rupee has fallen. I have not said that oil
Yeah.
prices in India
No,
have increased over the past few months.
so you were talking about prices going up. Because of that, oil prices going up, and in turn, everything other prices are going to go. But it's not like that, right? Inflation is something which is a domestic
Okay.
problem too, and it is not directly linked always to oil prices. That is the third point which I wanted to mention. Another point I think which you must point out to viewers is that with a lot of respect, because Dr. Manmohan Singh has been one of the finest economists, and huge respect. I'm no one in front of him, but during his time, during brief 3 years, rupee actually fell 36 rupees. So from 18 rupees to around 68 rupees is when Dr. Manmohan Singh, with a brief intermittent Mr. Bajpayee came. But under his tutelage, the entire thing fell. So please do not give this absolute figures because, 68 rupees to 86 over a
Okay.
period of 10, 12 years time is actually not too much. It's around 3%. So it has been managed very, very well. And if you look
Okay.
at some of the other countries like Brazil and many other countries, they have had around 9% kind of a depreciation. So up till now, the government has managed very well. But I must admit that in these 2, 3 months, it has been quite challenging. Also, you must point out to viewers that as inflation goes, everything actually becomes costlier. So the dollar is cost will become costlier over a period of time. So it's no surprise. And you are someone who's a journalist of that
Okay.
repute would also know, and I'm sure you must point out to all the viewers that the government of India, and right from Dr. Manmohan Singh's era, overall, there is no policy change as such. It's more or less same. Largely, the government wants to ensure that the rupee does depreciate in a manner it should, in a very slow manner, and among keeping the market forces in mind. But if there is a major change or some kind of a major dissonance, then RBI steps in. So now also RBI is stepping in and ensuring that
No,
the
but the
rupee
major
depreciates in
change
a manner
was
it
seen,
should.
Mr. Barriarr. Monday saw the single largest decline in a long time of over 60 pesos. It's not been exactly and always a very steady decline. However, I take your points on record. They're very well made and well reasoned points out. But the specific point which you mentioned about this comparison, and I'm bringing out these figures because that's what a lot of people from the Congress are saying, and I'm being joined by Anshul at this point to come in on that. Anshul, the point being made by Mr. Manish Barriarr is that the comparison which the Congress is saying that look at what the rupee was under Manmohan Singh ji's term and what it is under the Prime Minister's term right now is flawed because context needs to be taken into account. Is this something which the Congress is guilty of overlooking?
No, absolutely not. The problem here is that in the context in which there was a strong rupee in the UPA, it was followed by a very strong economy as well, with GDP growth rates of above 8%. There was capacity utilization of 100%. There was manufacturing, there was demand. And in fact, the real wages were more than the inflation rate. It was clearly a different context over there. It was a strong, developing economy which was ascendant at that time. What this government has done has brought the economy to its knees. Right? It's thrown it under the bus, particularly after demonetization and GST. And it is this fragile economy in which the falling rupee should be taken. I am less interested in the reasons why the rupee is falling. We know about, you mentioned it very, very clearly and quite in an articulate way. I don't have to repeat that. The surge in the dollar index, the strong US economy, the macroeconomics coming from there. There is uncertainty at the time of Trump. So the go-to currency is always the dollar. And in this case is increasing. But I'm more interested, as you pointed out, the effect in this fragile economy that a falling rupee and a weak rupee will have on businesses first, and then household incomes, directly households. So some of the things you mentioned, let's take it one by one, and let's try and unpack this. What impact will with a weak rupee at a time like this, when there is a manufacturing slump, when FDI is at its lowest, private investment is low, when capacity utilization is struggling at 75%, when there is poverty, there is inflation, and there is gross levels of unemployment, what it will do to small businesses. Now, on the face of it, you would think that no, our exports should increase, we should have a more competitive advantage. But that is certainly not going to be the case here, because already the economy is in a slump. And because other Asian currencies or emerging markets, their currencies have fallen as much because of the surge in the dollar index, they are going to have a better competitive advantage because of their stronger economic base, because of the their accessibility to technology. They're going to take all that advantage away. So we are not going to have any advantage as far as exports is concerned. And nonetheless, our export sector, which is, whether it's engineering or whether it's gems and jewelry, whether it's petroleum products, is highly defined by the imports. It's a highly import-intensive sector. And therefore, if import bills are high, that kind of cancels out the advantages you might get in exports as well. So there it's falling. Now, you also mentioned the household. That's one of the things that I've broadly mentioned. I mean, there is simply no advantage. And you've destroyed the MSME sector, which aids in export, labor-intensive export sectors, by your GST and your by demonetization anyway. It's struggling anyway. So this is the context here which we're looking at. We're also looking at inflation, which directly price rise, by the way, felt inflation, which is more because the CPI figures, tell one story after another. That's not the real thing. When you go to the market, that is felt price rise by the people. How is that going to be affected? It's not just airfare about going abroad. Airfare in India will rise, which in turn will affect travel and tourism and your burgeoning services industry. That's just one of those things that I'm pointing out.
So you mentioned,
otherwise, how it directly affects inflation.
Okay, please go on.
No. I'm just saying that all manner of impact at this particularly fragile nature of the economy, which is in doldrums anyway. All your indicators are bad.
Okay, so you mentioned, Anshul, a lot of cascading effects of the economy at this point. The point what Manish was saying is that these are all factors which are beyond the control of the government, because these are global factors, and we'll discuss the Trump tantrum which has been doing the rounds later. And the second is these are all not necessarily related to a strengthening dollar to begin with. I'm just summing up the 2 points. So let me then get in the 2 experts and the economists on the panel. And my only request to both Mr. Sardana and also to Madhavan is that understanding that let's try and declutter the jargon at this point to make this debate more accessible, because I genuinely feel that more people need to be aware about whether the falling rupee is some matter of concern for them or not. Sardana, coming to you first. Do you feel that there were certain policies which the RBI or the Finance Ministry could have followed, which could have arrested this fall in the rupee? Or do you feel that it was inevitable, as is being suggested by the government, and there's no need for concern?
First of all, good evening to you, fellow panelists, and the viewers. See, we have to appreciate that market forces are more powerful than political forces. Market does not look at Prime Minister or Parliament or Cabinet when they take decisions. Please understand that. They will react or they will anticipate whether the policy makers are doing the right thing or not, and market will always be proactive. Market is never reactive in many things. So what market is sensing is one thing very clear, that there are better opportunities than India. let us take out the money and go somewhere else. This is the way any trader will behave. And they are, I will say that logical, and this is a normal behavior of the money. Now, if we say that why rupee is falling, answer is simple. That there is more demand for dollar and less demand for rupee. Or let me say that there is more import and less exports. And if you look at that, that ultimately you have to decide that who wants what. I don't need rupee. I need dollar. And the demand goes up, the rupee flats. So this is what we have to, in simple terms, understand that why people are losing confidence on Indian economy comparative to other. One can say in isolation that everything is great in India, everything we are doing great, we are better than this and that. It is very good to remain happy in an optimistic scenario. There is no argument on that. But point here is that rupee dollar fluctuation is not what we think. It is what the market thinks. It is what the investor thinks. It is what the global players think about India. That is what it is. So what we have to understand is
No, but Mr. Sardana, surely the market does not have a mind of its own. Are you saying that political powers are completely influencing and completely helpless in influencing the mind of this market, which you say the market is proactive and not reactive?
No, market understands that political class is not doing enough what is to be done. See, that is what I'm saying. Why I lose hope?
Exactly.
I lose hope when I understand that there is a potential in India. It is the largest market of the world today with 145 crore people. But why policy makers are not taking the right decision to galvanize, to upgrade, to make this whole economy vibrant? That is the concern. And then they look at where is the better opportunity, they migrate. So if India is a big opportunity for them, they should look at it positively, should not pull out the money. It means it is a comparative analysis.
Okay, then let me put that across. Okay, thanks for making that clear, Mr. Sadhana. Let me then put that across to Madhavan Narayanan. Then if we go by what Mr. Sadhana's analysis is, Madhavan, is that the United States dollar has become a lot more lucrative and Indian economy is no longer that lucrative, which is why the dollar is strengthening, the rupee is falling. What political factors do you think are responsible for this conception? Is it entirely what's happening in the United States with Donald Trump making it very clear that strengthening the dollar is his number one concern, which is why this being seen as a Trump tantrum effect on all currencies, not just the rupee? Or do you feel that there are localized factors within what the policies the RBI has been taken which has caused this to be exacerbated?
I think, Ritangshu, let us be very clear about two things. The economics and politics here are, although interrelated, should be analyzed separately because our political class, and that particularly the BJP and RSS, because you yourself began by the debate by saying, Manmohan Singh was blamed. Now, Manmohan Singh was blamed for the wrong reasons. In the early 90s, he was stuck with a problem. He inherited the problem. And that problem was a symptom, the rupee weakening. He didn't cause it. He came there to fix it. It is like blaming the doctor for your illness, which you had before. Okay? That is the analogy. Similarly, when Manmohan Singh was the prime minister, the world economic crisis happened, the global economic crisis. People forget that. None of the panelists before mentioned that.
Yeah.
So that Manmohan Singh inherited a global crisis of that was
but
not
Madhavan,
his making.
I'm sorry, I'm just being devil's advocate at this point. People don't talk about Manmohan Singh ji inheriting dealing with the global slowdown. But Modi's government also had to deal with the COVID impact as well. And one could say that India has been relatively less affected by the COVID lockdown and the slowdown compared to other countries in the West.
So Modi's government is paying the price for blaming. It's the karma that is catching up with you. You blamed Manmohan Singh wrongly, and so you will be blamed also wrongly. You are conceptually illiterate or lacking integrity. These are the only two reasons. Let me put it in plain English. We can discuss the economics separately, which is why I said we should discuss the economics separately. Economics is a complex factor in which everything... Do you know, for instance, China kept the Chinese currency yuan weak for decades, not for months, not for years. Because that's how China became an export superpower. And today, every time the rupee gets weakened, the dollars get strengthened, then the exporters feel happier because it means an increment for them. And a weaker rupee is to the exporter what a pay hike is to you, Ritangshu, in every April or wherever when you get your appraisal. So, and they have to bear the cost of employees who suffer from inflation. So your cost keeps going up because of local inflation, but unless you recover it from the global market, this will not happen. So important thing that Ritangshu, where I find fault with you, let me be very clear, is that why do you have to praise consumers and blame exporters, whereas it should be the other way around? If you're consuming olives or imported diesel oil or traveling abroad, you had better earn foreign exchange yourself, otherwise shut up. So the foreign exchange is earned by exporters. China is today a strong economy because of its exports. It's got a trade surplus with India. It's got a trade surplus with the US, which is why Trump tantrum is beginning.
It's the consumers who can only expect that, because the reality is that we live in a country which relies more on imports than on what it exports, and as a result, every time the more you rely on it, as long as your trade deficit remains in positive, this is an inevitable factor. But Manish Barriarr, the very fascinating point which Madhavan said, and yes, this is as much a debate which is political as much as it is economical. The point is that Mr. Modi and the BJP from 2013 to 2014 made this a big political issue. At that point, it wasn't gone into the nuances as to why is the rupee falling so low and why is it falling that much. And as a result, is it then a consequence of karma that the former Prime Minister was perhaps blamed unfairly for factors which were also beyond his control, and as a result, the Congress is only justified in saying that as you reap, so shall you sow?
So I would beg to differ. I think Mr. Madhavan has been pretty harsh on the way he said and what he said. But if you look at, Manmohan Singh ji, very good human being, good economist, but may not be a great politician. And he was a failure as a prime minister, especially in the second term of UPA, and it is not hidden from anyone. So he was around. There was some kind of a his aura was lost because there was so much of corruption cases. So you cannot just point out one factor. And I do not agree with this karma thing, because Mr. Modi had attacked him on various issues. And one of the biggest issue was corruption. And I think if you take up on that count in last 10 years of his rule, you would not find any big ticket corruption being blamed on him as such, right? One can, really point out anything, but the country knows that when it comes to the major issue which he really raised about UPA 2, it was about corruption. And one of the thing was about rupee, but it was in a context. So I would not agree this karma coming down. And also I disagree with the fact that, Indian economy is not doing well. Right. If you look at globally other countries, you look at Argentina, you look at Brazil, you look at other countries, Asian countries also, 6.3% of GDP you show me. You show me, and with India being such a large economy, you show me that 6.3%. You look at other countries with whom
so you made two important points. You have essentially rebutted both. You have essentially rebutted both Madhavan Narayanan and also what Anshul Avijit has said. I'm sorry, we are running short of time, so I quickly want to get in some counter responses as well. Madhavan Narayanan, first, would you like to respond to what Manish believes of your criticism of karma, that it has to be again kept into context, and what the attacks against the UPA 2 were a concerted nature and not just a single point over just the rupee falling?
Now, economics is affected by many factors. Now, I am focusing today on the rupee and the conceptualization of global impact on the rupee alone. If you want to bring in corruption, you can bring in monsoon, you can bring in all sorts of X, Y, Z factors into this. I'm being focused on how much conceptually you are using apples and oranges. That is the limited logic of what I'm saying. GDP growth is good, but we are running a trade deficit and not a surplus, unlike Japan or China. So it's all about who you compare yourself with. Emerging markets, let's look at it positively also. Let me give you the positive picture. Compared to other emerging markets, the rupee is doing better because the Trump tantrum is affecting everybody. It's affecting India less than it's affecting some other emerging markets. So today, because you began with it politically, I had to use it conceptually to see whether the same yardstick is being applied for Manmohan and Modi or not. If you bring in corruption, we can bring in demonetization. If you bring in COVID, I can bring in global finance crisis. So there are everybody. The point with our politicians, my dear Ritangshu, which is why you and I
Exactly.
exist. Politicians are very liberal in blaming others and never accept even for a single moment that they could be themselves blamed. Now, oil prices, if you were, oil price was around $35 to a barrel when Modi took power. It was 108. Then it came to 35 within a year. So that was a big blessing for Mr. Modi. So I do
Yeah.
not blame him for that. But you have to understand that global factors affect you. It affects Modi, it affects Manmohan Singh, it affects whoever is the prime minister. But if you're
So
a
then
politician, be
when we
prepared
look
to
at the
be called
politics
out
being played
if
over
you're
this,
conceptually illiterate.
so then should the Congress also be called out, Anshul Avijit? The fact that, your party has some very senior people, not just you, people like such as Mr. Chidambaram, Mr. Ramesh himself, who understand how global economics and these concerting factors play out. I'm sure everyone understands that this is not something which can be pinned down to just one government's inefficiency. But just because your previous government faced these attacks from the BJP, now is this criticism born just after a spirit of just retribution then?
No, we've been critiquing this government on every single account. The fact is that Indian economy has become so vulnerable that if there is an adverse effect of the falling rupee, we immediately get the hit. And it's small businesses and households. It's a direct impact. Now, if we were detached from the global economy, or if our economy was $25 trillion, it wouldn't have an impact, right? Why is it affecting us? The government keeps taking refuge in the fact, just like it did in COVID, oh, it's not our fault. There is a certain level of helplessness. What can we do? These are external factors. It's the dollar, it's Trump, it's the American macroeconomy, it's strong labor market, something or the other. Also, the other logic I've heard is this has been completely normalized. Is it that is so okay? Is that there has been a 3.5% decline in the rupee for over 20 years or 30 years. So why should we care? It's a natural process of normalization that is happening. Now, that's an absurd argument to me, because the Indian economy is in such a state that it wasn't during Dr. Manmohan Singh. And yes, nobody needs, he had a stellar record. Nobody needs to defend him. And I'm not even interested in this debate of going back. I think this is the problem, that any single debate that I go to regarding any topic, it's always about what Congress did. It's no longer instructive for me. Let's analyze what is happening today and who's responsible. You can't keep going by 40, 50 years, 100 years and start blaming and bringing out people and blaming them when they have this absolutely stellar record of
Abhijit,
improving
I agree
our
with you. I
economy.
agree with that point. The
So
only
I'm not
point I'm
interested in
making
that
is that
debate.
that's precisely what Mr. Kharge and Mr. Ramesh did. And you can argue that they are well within the rights, but they are making
No.
comparisons
They
to
made a point
2014 and
that
2013.
no.
So obviously
There's a
then the
difference.
comparison becomes all-encompassing.
Yeah, there is a difference here, because our
What is the difference?
economy has
Quickly.
been made so deeply vulnerable by the fact of such wrong policies from the moment this government came in, from Make in India to, their capital intensive
Okay, so
policies.
if you're saying that
The
it's a
way
difference of
unemployment has
policies,
risen, it's
Okay,
all
okay, I
contributing.
don't want to cut you short, Avjit. I just want to get in a final response from
Yeah,
Vijay Sardana
sure.
because we're running short of time. Vijay Sardana, let's then put you in this very unenviable position of being the finance minister or the RBI governor. If you could come up with a 30-second quick fix which we can do in terms of policies to try and address this, or you think that this is a lost cause? There are too many factors to look at and you can't really pull the strings from the finance bhavan.
You can always do it. You are fortunate that you have 145 crore population. You are fortunate that you have all the agro diversities in the country. You are fortunate that you are not suffering from food insecurity as of today. But what you have to do it, you have to understand that why people are moving out of India. You have to do a comparative analysis of your policies with your competing countries like America, China, Brazil, or whichever country you feel where people are going. We are talking about Make in India. Do a proper comparison between Make in India, Make in China, Make in US, Make in Europe, Make in Singapore. You will come to know that there are serious flaws in your Make in India agenda. You will come to know that you have outdated policies which are still creating corruption at the ground level. People are, instead of manufacturing, importing from China and selling in India. You have to look at why your labor laws are so outdated. You have to understand why your cost of operation is so high, why you take so long a time in digital India and giving clearances and refunds to the companies. So what I have to do is there are a lot of things which can be done. So what finance minister should do? If I have responsibility, I will do simple one thing. Benchmark India on all performance parameter against the competing countries where people are going and investing. And wherever we are less, either taking more time, having more hassles, more cost of operation, more transaction cost, fix them. And if
Okay, so
laws are
that is a very
outdated,
important
fix
suggestion
them
coming
because
from you,
this is
Mr.
not
Sadana.
given wrong.
The RBI has indicated that the RBI governor today has indicated that he is looking at perhaps making the rupee a bit more flexible and be a bit more linked and dependent on other currencies, as competing currencies as well. Let's see how it happens. The point of this debate is to emphasize the importance of a falling rupee and to take it in context here. Politics will unfortunately go on. There's nothing that can be done about it. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for joining me on this very important debate. It's time for a short break. On the other side, the urban debate continues.